after reaching out. Oh, recording in progress. Okay. I met Josie after reaching out to her while I was on vacation in Seattle. And she has also begun a relationship with the Michigan Music Teachers Association president. So we're really excited to continue this sort of collaboration between Washington and Michigan. And I'm a part of the Kalamazoo chapter. I'm the immediate past president. And I'd just like to take a second to invite anyone who would be interested to submit a proposal to present to our president, Jennifer Drake, because we'd really love to continue to learn from each other. Just a little bit about me. I know you have my bio. I finished my undergraduate degree in 2019 at Western Michigan University. I studied piano performance and composition. And let me get my presentation up here. Can you all see my screen? Well, sorry, everybody. Okay. Can you all see my screen? Yeah?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. So this is the recital hall at Western. About a year or so into my performance degree, I suffered a playing injury, which is what brought me to the composition studio. And I'm still dealing a little bit with that today, but much better shape now. Currently working on my master's in piano performance, and I'm also the president and founder of a group called Arts in Action, and we put together concerts and art fairs in Kalamazoo to raise money for various humanitarian causes. We just had a really successful concert to help keep people who are about to be evicted in their homes. I'm really grateful that I was at your business meeting because I love how sort of politically active you all are. I think that's really important, and I'll definitely be bringing that back to camp. And then I'm also involved with the Suzuki Academy of Kalamazoo. I'm the keyboard area chair. And part of that job is hiring other piano teachers to accommodate the studio that we have, which includes more than 100 piano students. And in those interviews, I will often ask about what the interviewee's preferred method is, preferred piano method. And I always get an answer, and the answer is usually favorite piano adventures. But that question isn't really the issue, but the next one is that I like to ask is, why do you like that method? And the answers that I get to that question often sound like, it's what I grew up with, or it's what I've always used, or my least favorite, I don't know, but the kids like the pictures. So as we go through this presentation, whether you agree or disagree with any of my conclusions, the fundamental reason that I think it's important to talk about this is to just get us out of our comfort zones and to stop doing things just because it's the way that we've always done it, and hopefully, better serve our students through that exploration and analysis. And the catalyst for this particular presentation was a research project that I did last year analyzing 15 different piano methods. I did that for my degree. And we won't do exactly that today, but everything that I talk about today will come from that thesis, which is that modern methods certainly more interesting than they used to be, but they often miss the mark in terms of including pieces that promote correct hand posture and especially strong theoretical and reading fundamentals. And we're going to do sort of a deep dive into my personal favorite method, which is the music tree by Francis Clark. Thank you to those of you who filled out the form that I had sent out, the little survey. That was really helpful in preparing this. So yeah, let's get on into it. So my general criteria for rating a method is, we first of all we have sequencing, and if you'll indulge me for just a second, I'd like to show you this YouTube video that I really really love. A guy named Carl Sagan. I'm sure many of you have heard of Carl Sagan.
If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. Thank you very much.
Just love that video. It's from his show Cosmos, and I think it really encapsulates. If you couldn't hear it, he said, "If you wish to invent the universe, if you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe." And that concept of process down to its most fundamental roots, I think is really, really important to what we all do, not just in piano, but really, I mean, it's just a good life skill to be able to break something up really fundamentally, understand why you're doing what you're doing, and how it progresses to the next idea. So we're going to talk about sequencing a little bit. I think pacing is very important. If you move too fast, you tend to lose a lot of the sequencing. If you move too slow, that's just boring. And then we will talk about aesthetics a little bit, which are not nothing, but certainly not the core of what we're concerned about. So, like I said, my favorite method personally is the music tree. And I'm not here to convince you to drop what you're doing and start using the music tree, but it is the method that I know the best. I've taught the first 2 books to probably 100 students. I feel like I have a really good handle on its pros and cons, what I can do with it, what I can't do with it, what needs to be supplemented. But what I do hope is that after addressing all of these issues in my favorite series, and we're mostly going to be talking about the cons, that you all go and do the same to your favorite method, even if you don't end up switching over. Okay, so just a little bit of background for the music tree. So the series was primarily written by a woman named Frances Clark. I'm sure you have heard of the Frances Clark Center for Piano Education. We've got this really great tradition of piano pedagogy in Kalamazoo. If you don't know, we have the Gilmore Keyboard Festival every year. It's one of the largest international keyboard festivals in the world. You'd never expect a place like Kalamazoo to have something like that. And Frances Clark is a part of that tradition, having written the music tree after graduating from Kalamazoo College, a small private school that we have in Kalamazoo. And this is, of course, geographically specific to me, but it's really important to have that lineage there because the parents love it. It legitimizes the tradition of music making, not just in like a grand sense, but in a much more local and intimate way. And that, I think, goes a really long way of getting the families to sort of buy in to what we're trying to do. So just a quick overview. So one of the strengths, I think this book is extremely thorough. The first 2 books. Each concept is for the most part appropriately reinforced, particularly where pre-reading is concerned. Most methods might have like 15 to 20 pages of pre-reading, but as far as the music tree goes, almost the entire book is off. The first book is off the staff. And I think that's really important. So we use the intervallic method in the music tree. I really, really believe that this is superior to the Evil Gerbils Burn Down Fields method because it forces students to see music notes as functioning within units rather than as individual discrete pieces of information. So it teaches them not just about the notes themselves, but how they function and their relationship to how they feel in the hand. And it also makes it extremely clear. It also makes the function of the clefs really clear, because we're using treble G, bass F, and middle C as landmark notes. And I just don't think that clefs are that's a big weakness in my opinion, for a lot of other methods. So this approach to me is absolutely crucial because reading skills in both music and in English right now, as I'm sure you all know, are severely lacking. Test scores are down, and you can see it in a lot of the younger students. They're having a hard time reading even the words on the page, not just the notes. I think the sequencing of the music tree is really strong. So one concept leads into the next really nicely, and it is appropriately introduced in different kinds of contexts. So you get that like reinforcement. There are some exceptions to that I'm going to get into. All right, so some weaknesses. Slow, unsteady progression. So it's too slow for the older kids. There's enough material where you could kind of like skip them around. But in my experience, anyone who's like 10 and older is going to get pretty bored with this pretty quickly. And the early pieces can just be too repetitive, until suddenly they're not, and that can really, really trip up some kids. We don't really talk about note names in the music tree except for the landmarks, and that is an issue not just on the page, but also at the instrument. There are pages in the music tree that introduce the notes on the piano, but it's really more of an afterthought, is what it feels like. And so if you're going to use this method, it is really on you to be reinforcing that as like a warm up as you're going through this method, because there will come a time where they are on the staff, and if they don't know the notes on the piano, that's going to make it much, much harder. And there are no five-finger patterns or other positions in the first two books. And, there's a lot of talk about, whether or not a method should lock you into a position. And the answer is probably not. But it is good to have multiple positions so that, it reinforces that keyboard geography. And there's just very little technique in general in these books. So again, if you're gonna use the music tree, you have to be prepared to supplement some of that. Okay, I want to just very quickly talk about the aesthetics. So there are these two very cute characters in the music tree named Chip and Bobo. And, we've got an explanation of what they, of their function. Chip has big eyes, who helps you see the music. Bobo has big ears, helps you listen to every sound at the piano. Now, the problem with this is that they are not consistent with that throughout the book. They are cute, but the lack of narrative and consistency, I think, kind of wastes them and does not utilize the characters' potential ability to communicate information. And I think that characters like this can be helpful to grab a student's attention. Personally, I find them pretty distracting, unfortunately. So I use this method 9 times out of 10 when I get either a new student or a transfer student from another teacher. Because the biggest problem that I often see, as I already sort of alluded to, is reading music. This method is really reading centric. To me, that is the purpose of a method. And I recognize that there are other skills surrounding musical playing that are really important, but I try really hard to take that upon myself to teach rather than relying on the book in front of us. I I think this kind of gets into the discussion of what is the function of a method book. I think it's about reading, only because we can all teach pieces by rote. I, most of us can, I think, without anything in front of us. Okay, so let's get into the first book. It's called Time to Begin. It's like their primer. So most of this book, as I said, is pre-reading, and it begins with basic up and down instructions. Okay, going to the right, sounds get higher, going to the left, sounds get lower. And it does a really good job of correlating that high-low with right hand, left hand. And it also begins us with some basic up-down instructions. You know, the right hand plays the up stem notes, the left hand plays the down stem notes. It's all on the black keys for some time. There are diagrams for certain positions that get progressively harder. And we really only start with one finger at a time. One of the things I really like about this is that it asks students to observe and analyze the music before playing. There, on almost every page, there are questions that need to be discussed and answered. And you know, a lot of you said to me on the survey that Faber is your favorite method, and one of you went so far as to say that it saved your studio, and I love that for you. And Nancy and Randall Faber are actually Michiganders. They live in Grand Rapids. I've met them a number of times. Very, very nice people. In my view, that method doesn't ask enough questions. I think we always need to be asking questions, if only to make sure that the students are observing what's on the page. So this, you know, right hand up stem, down, left hand down stem, you know, this presents problems later on when the staff is introduced, because of course that's not how music is always notated. In fact, often not how it's notated. And it also creates a problem later with whole notes, which don't have stem. So invariably, I have students asking me, well, I don't know which hand to play this with, even if there's a finger number on top of it. But what this does do is it allows for the exploration of the entire keyboard without octave lines or ledger lines. So the first two songs, Takeoff and Landing, some of the songs are paired, which I really love because it suggests a sort of narrative. You know, if we lead with our right hand and take off and we go up on the piano, well, then landing, you know, we're going to lead with the down hand and we're going to go down on the piano. So there's a certain intuition in these pieces that tells the student something about how it's going to sound, what it's going to feel like on the piano. And the notes are grouped in 4x4, which is which is good because it begins to cement metric ideas without having to introduce the time signature, which is a pretty complex concept in my view. And there are 22 songs that are exactly like this, and there is only one song on the white keys before this paradigm changes. And this is suddenly and immediately problematic if you haven't been learning note names all along. This is where that problem starts to come in, because, you know, they even, you can't really see it on this, but they even ask you on the left side of the page to name the white keys. And if you haven't been doing that with your students, of course, they're not going to be able to do that. They will probably be able to figure out where their hands have to go because of the diagram that's given at the top there. But they won't know the names of the notes. So after all of this off the staff stuff, we get into the sort of second part of the same book, which introduces the staff one line at a time. All of these pieces name the first note to give the positional context without diagrams. And what this does is it sets us up to understand the function of the clefs. Okay, so instead of having that G in front of the staff, eventually we'll put a treble clef in and they'll understand because we've been telling them what that starting note is. They will understand the function of the treble clef is to tell us where G is. And they get used to looking at that part of the page to know where those landmarks are. So I do think that this is somewhat of a bad intro, only because it sort of overuses G and F as starting notes, and also that's what our clefs are for. So there could be an argument about that either way. And it also doesn't differentiate between broken and blocked intervals at any point. It doesn't talk about like melodic or harmonic intervals. And this mostly works. There's usually not a lot of confusion about that, except in the case of this song, "Stubborn Mule," because it's a second. It's easy maybe for a student or even someone older to assume that like, oh, the notes are right next to each other, but they're not on top of each other. So maybe I play them one right after another, and that can cause a rhythmic problem. This is one of those pieces where I ask a question that's not on the page, and I say something like, well, what do you think happens here? And then they either give me a right or a wrong answer, and we talk about it. So one of the first problems I have with this book is that so they start introducing the staff, very important, but then they go back to that pure pre-reading with this dinosaur song, and I think this is a weakness. And the only reason I can think that she did this is to help sort of pick up the pace of the book a little bit. But there's so much momentum at this point that I think is lost due to this song. So I really love the time signature page. I think this is one of the real strengths of this book, because time signatures are hard. You put a 4-4 in front of a kid, and it's like, okay, the top 4 tells you how many beats are in the measure, but not the bottom 4. That's a different kind of 4. And if they don't understand like basic fractions and the concept of 4 representing a quarter note, is really tricky. I really love just getting rid of this number down at the bottom and just putting the note there. And I don't think that Frances Clark was the first person to do that, but I haven't seen it in a lot of other pedagogical music. And by the time we're ready to introduce time signatures for real, they have a good understanding of what that bottom number actually means. My first real sequential issue with this book, she does move on to the full signature, but it's too fast, and she does it on the same page as, okay, now we're going to start actually reading on the staff, which is a highly complex skill. That's a big jump. So there's just too much new information all at once, and this is always sort of, a barrier for us towards the end of this book. So then she starts talking about whole notes, which I, already said there's a little bit of a problem here because of the rule that the up stems are with the right hand, down stems are with the left hand. But it does fulfill the metric idea of 4-4, and it cleans the end of the phrases up pretty well. It's weird to have like more motion at the end of a melodic phrase, I think. So another sequential issue is all the way in book 2. We start to get symbols that tell us when we need to shift positions. So just exclamation marks, and they bring it to the attention of the student. But we have a problem here because this is in the first book, and it's all with the third finger. And if you see in that third measure, you have to shift your hand. So, but we haven't done any shifting up until this point. They don't make any effort to point that out. So I've taught this book so many times that I should know that now, and I know we have to have a discussion about it. But this is just one of those places where it's the teacher's responsibility to make up for the shortcomings of the book. So, right, here we go. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, so this is another spot where you have a whole hand shifting and there's just no indication about it. And it's just one of those things that I think makes reading a lot harder than it is. But anyway, so when we introduce full staff, full stave, standard bass clef, treble clef songs with the landmarks and middle C. She doesn't really introduce middle C on the staff. You can see that she introduces it on the keyboard up there, but it's just sort of expected that the student is to know that that C is a fifth above the F. That's a problem, I think. And there's only one song for each clef until she gets into the grand staff. There are only 5 songs on the grand staff on this first page, or excuse me, on this first book. And the last song is much harder and longer than anything else in the book. It's 2 pages long, and it's got an ABA form. If you see, it says return to page 70, so you have to go back and play the first one again, and that is a really, really big jump. And I also think that there's a weakness in this piece where if you look at that first page, seasoned musicians can see what's going on here compositionally. Like, okay, you got a little motive in the right hand, and it goes back and forth between the accompaniment and the left hand. But that second line down, it switches, and that's a hard thing to do for a lot of kids. That's a hard thing to do. They're just learning how to read music. To me, it's kind of a cheap shot. You've got this really difficult piece, way harder than anything that you've done before, and also you're trying to, parse through all this information and actually read the music on the page. So it might be a good idea to start part 1 before playing this song, because the music through part 1 begins with a bunch of review. There are 8 more pieces that begin on landmark notes. It's a really good review for that landmark method reading. In my opinion, there really should have been more of these in that first time to begin book in order to prepare us for that last piece that we saw, that graduation mark. It introduces the sort of middle ground dynamics. Personally, and maybe some people disagree with this, I think that mezzo dynamics are really hard conceptually for small children, because like, what's the difference between kind of loud and kind of soft? I don't know. I think that's a difficult thing to put into words. So I teach it to them anyway, but some of the kids have a really hard time with that concept of volume is on a spectrum, and I think dichotomies and binaries are a lot more effective for teaching. So we start to see pieces that are starting on notes other than landmarks, and they do this completely intervallically, never teaching anything, any other note names other than our 3 landmarks, and they continue with that strategy all the way to the end of this series. We start a second above and below the landmarks, and we start a fifth above and below. And I am a really strong proponent of the landmark method because I think ultimately it creates stronger readers, but there's no reason, in my view, that we should leave so many gaps in using this method in terms of the letter names. So again, there's just a responsibility on the teacher to also be making sure that we all understand which notes are which. So if we get into some symbols here, repeats introduced as one would expect. Staccato markings are introduced as one would expect, in my opinion, a little bit late. Like I said, I think dichotomy is really important. And it would be nice to have the sort of binary to slurs that are introduced in the previous book, so we can hear a clear difference between notes that are slurred together, that are part of the unit, and then notes that are their own discrete sounds. But this is a pretty common place to put them anyway, I think. Form introduced in this book, which I love, but again, there's a little bit of a sequential thing. I think the students have a hard time with the spectrum, and we start with form. They ask us, what is the difference between A and A1? And that to me is a lot harder of a question than the following page when they ask us, what is the difference between A and B? Because then you can get into the real nitty gritty of like, okay, well, what are the parameters of music that create form? And in this case, it's slurs versus staccato, and there's a textural thing because the left hand has more motion, and A is piano and B is forte. This is another place where there's a hand shift where they don't tell us anything about it. So this next piece. This is one of those missed opportunity pieces because there was a real chance here to show the difference between melodies built on third and melodies built on seconds, and they label those slurs A B, and that's the biggest difference in my view between those melodic ideas. To me, it should be second nature to be pointing out those kinds of differences in a book that is so heavily dependent on the intervallic method. So again, just digging into some of these pieces, they're not just songs to be played. They should all have pedagogical merit, in my view. Okay, so here's the problem with the stem direction is early in Music Tree Part 1, we have our first song that uses different stem directions than what was introduced in the song called Encore, you can see on the left. And they give you the directions down at the bottom. Circle the right hand, B and measure 4. So far, up stems have shown right hand and down stems have shown left hand. From here on, any note on or above the third staff line will use a down stem. You guys know the rules. Okay. The problem with that is shortly after, you've got a song, Farmer in the Dell, okay, that takes us right back to that, left hand down stem, right hand up stem rule. And that back and forth, to me, is really detrimental to a student's learning. And in fact, I skipped this piece in the book because I just don't think it's helping with our primary goal of reading music. And this is not the only time it does that. It's not the only time. There's only one page to introduce rest. I took this screenshot from the European publication of this book. There is an American version with the quarter rest, half rest, whole rest instead of the crotchets and whatnot. There's only one page to introduce these rests, and that's really not spoken about again. And I don't think it's a very difficult concept, but I personally would like a little bit more, particularly for the half rest, full rest ordeal where it's just the same symbol flipped over. And I also think that it could probably be introduced a little bit earlier, just really towards the end of this second book now. And then we have accidentals, which are introduced appropriately, although I do wish that they would talk a little bit about enharmonic spelling. One thing I really like about this is that they address the fact that white keys can also be accidentals. That's really important to just say. I think the weakness of this is, to me, that they don't couple it with an introduction of half steps and whole steps, which doesn't happen until the following book. I think that these are just two concepts that are just sort of married to each other. They belong together as a unit. But again, that's something that you can supplement yourself as a teacher, and probably do a better job visually on the keyboard rather than, whatever is on the page. Okay, the last thing I want to talk to you guys about today are the cultural considerations. So there are at least 3 pieces in the Music Tree series that are at this point in time considered culturally inappropriate. They are in the first book, Camtown Races, which you don't know is a minstrel song, often performed in blackface as part of the Christie's Minstrel group. And then in the following book, part 1, you've got Forest Echoes, depicts a Native American person. Of course, it's all about fits and that sort of troping and stereotype is prevalent in a lot of piano methods from the 60s to the 90s. You see Native Americans always being depicted as having very very simple intervallic content. And then there's another one in the following book. It's called Big Chief, which is offensive for obvious reasons. So I don't really understand why these are still in the books. These books are still in publication. I don't think it would be much for Alfred to just, even if they just changed the name, something more appropriate, and these are not the only examples in this method of just outdated material. And I think personally we should all be demanding more from our publishers. So anyway, I just wanted to leave with that. Kalamazoo Area Music Teachers Association works really hard to make sure that students are learning music by BIPOC composers. So it's really disappointing to see stuff like this still being published. But I will get off my soapbox about that. And that is really the end of my presentation. Thank you all for listening, and I'm going to stop sharing now. And I'd like to just open the floor for questions, comments, concerns, and jokes.
I'll go. Thank you so much, Michael. That was awesome. It does sort of seem like no matter what method you use, like the goal of teaching for a while is that you figure out how to fill in the gaps, right? And so like throughout the music tree stuff, as a lot of the things you point out is like, oh yeah, you got to deal that with this way over here, and whatever the piano safari stuff, that one's too slow on this way, or whatever you might think about it, or like with Faber, like I don't know. I'll get bogged down in this part of this book, and it's just not as important as the bogging down that happens, and I got to figure out how to like fill in the gaps so they can get past it. But would you say that there's something about the music tree that like cuts it ahead of the pack where that's concerned, or?
Not any more than any other method. I do think when you use one method for so long, I think you can kind of convince yourself that it's like ahead of the game, but it's not. You just learn to like anticipate these problems earlier on, so they don't become problems in the first place. So that would be my advice is before you switch over to any method, just take a look at what their primer series is doing and just go through each piece and ask yourself, what is the pedagogical purpose of this, and does it lean too heavy in one direction or
another? The thing that I wanted to comment about was how innovative this Francis Clark system was in the first place, because before this we just had Thompson and Aaron, I think it was. I don't remember them anymore. But after this Francis Clark series came out is when we started getting the Faber method, starting with the black keys patterns. I mean, all that comes from Francis Clark.
That is so important because it's not just about reading music at that point. It's about the geography of the keyboard, which can really be, I think, diminished.
Like even there, like at least apocryphally, didn't Chopin start his students on like D flat major and like B major? And that's the whole reason. It's because the hand just fits them in a really natural way.
Yes. So I can tell you that it's not apocryphal because that was a big part of the paper that I wrote last year. You can read about it in letters that he sent to people. You can read it about in letters from his students. Um, so yes, he started everybody on B major um, because the long fingers naturally want to gravitate towards those keys that are further away, which makes sense. I think it's in the old Baston method where one of the first pieces starts the kids on a G flat five finger pattern where you have to get your thumb up there. And it's like, why are you getting these kids? Like, okay, you're halfway there. You're using the black keys, great, but you're putting them in a position that those tiny hands are just never going to be comfortable. So keeping the thumb on that white key, keeping the long fingers on the black key, very important, I think.
They do have a series of technique book. What do you think about it?
I'm sorry?
The technique book from Francis Clark?
I don't know the technique book. I know there's
It,
an act.
mhm.
I know there's an activities book that I don't very much care for. To be perfectly honest with you. I mean, I guess whatever gets the kids interested in, music is fine with me, but I don't think it's that. And there is a Francis Clark technique book. I don't think it's tied to the music tree. So I've not explored that myself. Um, I'll have to keep you guys in the loop. I'm actually part of a team right now writing a book about Francis Clark. So when that comes out, hopefully next year, I'll send it over your way. But
Because I have all my students taking RCM exam, so I only use a different method book for the first 2 years. And
okay.
yeah, I do use that, you know, because I cannot stand every student come and using a same method book. So I use a different method book to different one.
It does get old. Does get old.
Yeah.
Um, can I ask you guys what kind of testing does Seattle itself have, or maybe Washington? We have a yearly program called student achievement testing. It's like a theory, and technique. You guys have something similar to that? Okay.
We do the
Do you like
music literacy project, is what it's called out here.
music project? I like that a lot.
It's good. And it's sort of students can sign up for whichever components of it they want to, but there's a reading, there's a rhythm, there's whatever technique and sort of functional theory. There's a written test, and then the
Listening.
listening, yeah. And they can each sign up at whatever levels within each of those they want to, and they level from whatever 1 to 10. And we do a whole like weekend of it where people volunteer to be proctors, and it's really cool. But yeah, it's actually, I think our materials are initially based off of a Kansas City, Missouri thing. I think I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, a lot of Wendy Stevens in
Yeah.
there.
It's great.
Yes, once they start, learning theory, and then they will find it so slow on, music trees.
Yeah, yeah. Music tree is definitely slow, and I think that's good because my biggest critique in the paper that I wrote for most of the other methods were this is just way too fast. It's hard to understand how we got from point A to point B. So I think I'd rather go slow, but yeah, for those older kids, it just doesn't work. Doesn't work.
I'm wondering about recommending something for my little grandson, and his mother does play piano, but not with, doing it without a piano teacher because he's so young, but he seems talented or interested. And do you think that that would be a good way just to start? Because it is so slow, and it's with so much pre-reading, it seems like it would be good. And then she could transition to a music teacher who wants to use whatever, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I I've had teenagers go through music tree, and we moved pretty quick through it. Just like, okay, you understand this? All right. Well, then we don't need these five other pieces. But you know, yeah. How old is he?
3.
Music tree is the way to go
This little tiny guy.
for sure. For sure.
Yeah, but still, there's going to be points where a a piano teacher with experience will approach it differently than the parent will. The parent will try to do it the way it's in the book, and the teacher will know from experience, well, no, we're not getting that. Like, for example, the dichotomy. I really like what you're saying about that.
Dichotomies are super important, and I think especially to the ear, we really have to hear like strong differences between, okay, it's piano and then it's forte, and that's why those medium dynamics are just so hard for some kids, because it's kind of loud, it's kind of soft. That doesn't mean anything.
I remember my kid brother stopped his piano lesson when he was 3 from my mom, and he could have lesson every other day or every twice a week. So you don't have to pay, but you learn faster. Now he is professionally, he's a violinist.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that article in the American Music Teacher magazine about once a week lessons.
I read that.
I once had a transfer student who just came from China, young student. The family took him back to China for a summer, and they told me that the system they have in China is that you would have a weekly lesson with an instructor, but there's tutors who comes to your house to help you, a few extra times a week to help your help your children practice.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that is the thing too. Is you can do everything right in a lesson, and they go home and their practice not good. So that's. I mean, I often wonder if we're headed back towards the mentor mentee model, just in general, seeing what's going on in like schools and everything. I mean, it really seems to be breaking apart, and that reinforcement at home is just crucial. Crucial. What I love about the Suzuki philosophy, I don't teach Suzuki method, but that idea of just having the parent involved in the lesson, sort of learning along with the kids, really important, really important in all things. Well,
I wonder if this could work with the little tiny ones more than other methods, including Zoom, because little kids don't work well on Zoom, like on FaceTime, something like that. But this doesn't, it's just so this finger, this finger, this finger, this finger, not like, hand shape kind of.
right.
I wonder if it might be better to start with this.
Well, and that, I mean, again, it's a pro and a con of music tree. I love the idea that we're keeping it simple and it's just one finger at a time. The problem with that is you get a lot of this, that collapsed knuckle, because they're just going like this, and I'm always having to like curve that hand shape, But I don't think, I mean, if that's the worst of it, most methods don't address that at all anyway.
That Faber with the cat, they do that.
I like the cat. And there's another. Do you guys know Helen Marley? Helen Marley. She's also in Grand Rapids. She is great. I've met her a number of times. And her method, and I write about this in my paper, is the only one that really attaches itself to the physicality of playing the piano. I mean, she does just such a good job with like woodpecker and the tissue box. All kinds of succeeding at the piano. That's right.
Penelope Raskol out in the UK has done a series of books that are really cool, that are good on that level of being really attentive to like sort of evocative introductions of good techniques. So they talk about like the crushed spider versus like the safe spider and stuff like that. So her stuff's really fun, and then I really like the Piano Safari people. Specifically, their animal adventures like Extract, where they just bring out their animal styles into its own thing. Because I actually think their method is just a glacial experience.
Yeah.
But those like the animal styles are really cool, and again, like even just like the physicality of them kind of matches the animal they're asking you to imagine, and the sort of names that they give them. So there's lots of like technique stuff that's focused in those two series, but yeah, all the other ones I've touched are sort of like do it, but it's not here.
Yeah, I don't teach Piano Safari, but I did analyze it for this paper, and one of the things that I like about it the most, it sounds sort of superficial, but I don't think so because it's quite long, as you guys know. Like the books are, about twice as big as any other method, and it you need that space. You need that space. You need those lessons. If you're gonna, if the purpose of a method is to teach about musicality in general, you need all of those pieces to understand it. And like I said before, I think the purpose of the music tree is to learn how to read music, and it does that really well, and that is all it does. That's all it does. So just having that content there is really key.
Well, I'm here to sit in for Josie, who had to fly, is on the plane, I guess. We're at the airport right now. We've got just a couple more minutes before we are finished with our meeting. Any more comments from our peanut gallery here?
So thank you, Michael. I enjoyed your presentation. So, I mean, ultimately, I think your point is probably that ideally, if we could combine all of the methods in a way.
Be great. That would be great. And I mean, that's sort of what Piano Safari is, I think, is an attempt to take all the